Here comes the long throw home. Touchdown. Yaz has scored. Sable to third. And Luciano to second base after the RBI single.
Now, back to Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game.
It just feels different. I can't even describe it. There are plenty of people who I think capture our attention when they come in and start to do special things. Christian McCaffrey, Kevin Durant, Hunter Pence. We can do this all day long. You know who I think is amazing and has been the most underrated signing that probably Farhan Zaidi has ever made is Jordan Hicks. Like that just, whoop, it just slipped that on in and nobody even thought much of it. He's been fantastic. He's been their best pitcher. He's been their most consistent guy so far. So guys can come from elsewhere and really capture our attention, obviously. But the rest of it just hits different. I don't know how many of you went to any of the games this weekend for the Giants and Rockies, or if you just watched on TV or whatever. The whole thing just feels different when people in your own system start to produce. And that has been the concern all along. The frustration of the last at least few months from me has largely been based on the fact that even these guys down on the farm, it just didn't look like it was going to click. And so this is only one weekend. But if injury forces these guys up and they can perform like this and stay, and that does happen, Draymond Green's career is because of something like that, then that is going to change the entire feeling around this organization. Grandy said something to us this morning. Do you agree with this? If these guys stick and stay, it almost makes Farhan look worse. Do you agree with that?
No.
Why not?
Because how would it make him look worse? The fact that he somehow suppressed their arrival? Maybe they wouldn't have been ready until now. I don't know how you can draw a line from, them doing well to this somehow making Farhan look bad, because I guess the argument would be Farhan should have had him up earlier, and if they would have been up earlier, which they were last year, and they didn't look this good last year, and I know it's a small sample size, but is that Farhan's fault for not having him up earlier?
Well, instead of speaking for you, Grandy, how would you describe it? Why? Why do you feel like if these three guys continue to perform, it might make Farhan look worse?
I was thinking along the lines of, so let's assume that the team stayed healthy. Ahmed stayed healthy, Conforto stayed healthy, Jung-Hoo Lee stayed healthy, and there was no reason to bring these guys up. Maybe that reason eventually would have happened if everyone continued to not be able to hit the ball. But say you get into June or July and the team's struggling and the veterans are still not hitting the ball and you're out of the race entirely. If the hand wasn't forced to bring up the young guys to see what they could give you, we wouldn't know anything still at this point. And we don't know anything now. I mean, it's a very small sample size, but there's a reality where you stay healthy and your team is hurting because of it, because these three guys are still down in AAA.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, Dibs, in that this is one of those things we will never know.
Right.
Okay, why didn't Jonathan Kuminga start playing 28 minutes back in November? Would he have been good? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. You could make the argument, but
you can make whatever argument you want to make. Yeah. And the reason why Jonathan Kuminga got to play a lot more is because Draymond Green couldn't control himself. And he choked Rudy Gobert. And he flail punched Yusuf Nurkic. And he had to go bye-bye. Draymond, go bye-bye. And so because of that, well, what are we going to do? We don't have Draymond Green. Let's play Kuminga more because we need a guy to play that athletically in that position. And then he played well. And so now it's like, all right, does Kerr get credit for going to Jonathan Kuminga there? Or does he not get credit because the only reason why he did it is because he had no choice? I
do get that. Now here's the rub. Here's the rub. Because if we say that, and we have at times, I know there's people out there that you're creating a scenario where the coach in the front office can never be wrong. It's like, well, we didn't, right? Let's go back to Trey Lance. Well, he never got a chance. Well, there was a reason that he never got a chance because he wasn't any good in practice. Okay, but how do you know? Well, again, you got to earn your way onto the field.
Well, they could be wrong if Trey Lance goes out and balls out with someone else.
Right?
And so far, Jordan Poole and James Wiseman have not proved the Warriors wrong.
Not at all. So, but if someone does come up and perform well, if you're like, well, front office was just perfect. They just nailed it at exactly the right time. I get why some people are like, wait a minute, this is a catch-all. You're gonna say they got it right no matter what, because if they come up and they're not ready, they just send them right back down. If they come up and they stay, they're like, see, we knew that it was time. Like there's no way to know if it's exactly the right time. There's no way to know if this is actually the right time unless it goes a lot longer than this. That's why I keep looking at it as, well, hold on, tell me what the alternative is, right? I'm not, in general, and I think y'all know this about me by now, I'm not in favor of, well, just give a bunch of playing time to the kids. Why? Because I don't think we're any good anyway. Well, it's not time for that. It's way too early in the season to be hucking seasons out the door and doing the whole like, well, let's just throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. That's no good. I'm in general, I am not in favor of giving guys playing time that they haven't earned. But there's all kinds of mystery with the process of bringing them up. That's why I ask about the alternative, because if the playing time is being held against or held from the young player, I'll go, okay, who is it you got? So the Kuminga thing was an interesting conversation to me because you have two very accomplished wings on the Warriors. Are they who they used to be? We can argue. Is one of them asleep half the time? We can argue. But the bottom line is the Warriors had two other all-star wings who are veterans in the NBA when it comes to should Jonathan Kuminga be playing more. Well, what do the Giants have at shortstop? Well, they've got light-hitting Nick Ahmed, who they grabbed on a flyer 2 weeks before the year started. So that's why I'm focused on Luciano. That's why I think Luciano should have been the guy from the beginning, because the alternative is not something that's going to win you a bunch of games. It's a placeholder. It can help you like not lose games, but he's not going to go out there and win you baseball games. So then it's like, well, then give him a shot, because it's kind of like, what do you got to lose?
Right, and that's where you are now, where he's getting a shot, and it's because Nick Ahmed got hurt, and if Luciano plays as well as he has over the last 3 or 4 games, then he's going to keep that spot, and he's going to go out there, and everyone's going to get what they wanted so badly, which is to see the youngster come up and play shortstop. But I do think, in my mind, you have to, at some point, default to the experts when it comes to why you go out and get Nick Ahmed. They see him up close and personal. They saw Luciano all throughout March and spring training, and they didn't see what they liked. And so they didn't feel like he could be their starting shortstop. Even though last year you sat in the dugout and talked to Farhan and he told you point blank that, you know, there's no room for Crawford and it's going to be Luciano, and it wasn't. So why wasn't it? What wasn't he doing that was good enough for him to get the starting job back in the end of March?
Yep.
And that's something that they probably won't answer.
No, of course they're not going to answer. And the inside answer has been, well, he's not played his way up. And that one to me is always a little bit of a head scratcher. I know that's a difficult sort of fence to ride, if you will. Like, yeah, you want guys to achieve and force their way up to the next level. But in baseball, just because someone's hitting 250 for 2 months does not mean they're not good. It doesn't mean that. Like, again, you know, if you've got someone who has the upside of a Marco Luciano, to me, you do that. You do that over Nick Ahmed. I'm not bringing up Matos because you got Jung-Hoo Lee. You're not bringing up Ramos because you've got Michael Conforto and Mike Yastrzemski. It was getting close. Yaz was really struggling. Slater's actually the comp for Ramos. He's been really bad. It was getting close. If Slater had, here's my perception, not reporting this. My perception is if Slater had not gotten hurt, he had about 3 more weeks. He had about 3 more weeks before Ramos was going to get the call. And so now you get stuck into a really interesting spot because if they keep hitting, then the Giants are going to have an impossible time sending any of them back down.
Right. You're not going to send Ramos down. And, Matos, certainly the guy who's player of the week, and he's your center fielder. He doesn't have to worry about it. But if it's Elliot Ramos, why would you send him down now in place of Austin Slater? And, the interesting name you threw out before was Wilmer Flores. And not that you're going to make a move on Wilmer, but he's only played once in the last 4 days. And like you said, you haven't really missed him because Lamont Wade is doing such a good job at first base, and he's a guy that you can't afford to have out of the lineup. So you start to look at a lot of these veterans through an interesting lens because Wilmer's not having a very good year. OPS of 563. He's got 1 home run, and it's not a small sample for Wilmer. He's at 131 plate appearances, and he's done almost nothing.
Yep.
So, you look at, really, you start to look at a lot of these guys, and you have to, default to the contract more than anything. And, this is the last year of Wilmer's deal. And I guess there's a small player option for next year, $3.5 million. But you could, if things continue, you could make moves on a lot of these guys.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco and Odyssey Sports Station, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube. Powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Upgrade your savings dividend. Open a First NorCal first-class money market today. Yeah, Flores was in that lineup. He was batting third when the Giants won 14-4. He went 0 for 3.
Right.
With the strikeout. And then he got pinch hit for by Lamont Wade, who came in and went 1 for 2 with a run scored. Yeah, he's like, it's crazy because he was their best hitter last year. And he has been rendered into sort of roving backup mode. Wilmer Flores can be your backup first baseman, third baseman, and DH, but he's not doing much.
Right.
And so Lamont Wade has been so good. I do think you start thinking about, I actually would love to look at his splits. Lamont Wade, how's he doing against left-handers this year? He probably only has a handful of at-bats, but that's an example of a guy that if his splits are okay, just make him your first baseman.
Yep. 4 for 12 against lefties. So
he's only got 12 at bats, but he's hitting 333.
Right. 333. He's hitting 320 against righties and 333 against lefties with, he's got a double, 4 hits and a double.
The dude's OPS is almost 900.
Yeah.
Okay? He's hitting 315. His OPS is almost 900. He's the more athletic guy, obviously, so he's better on the base paths. He has been maybe the only Giant offensively where you look at him this year and you're just like, no worries there. That guy's been great. Make him your first baseman.
Yep.
Just make him your first baseman.
And that's what I'm saying as we look at this team going forward, and you mentioned it over, yesterday's game where you had just the 9 guys. Your batting order was your batting order. You had your 9, and you played the 8 in the field. You had your DH, who was your leadoff hitter, and that was it. You didn't have to worry about 5th inning lefty and bringing the righty and got to go to the lefty, and this guy's going to pinch hit, and this guy's going to come in for defense. You had your team, and you had your young guys, and that was it. And it's getting exciting when you start to think about Matos, Ramos, and Luciano, and then you throw in Bailey when he comes back, and Wade, and Soler, and Chapman, and Estrada, and Yaz. I mean, these are guys who you can think about wanting to see each and every day. That has value to the fans.
I'm just sitting here looking at this box score from that game, 14-4.
Yep.
Matos, Ramos, Luciano, they all batted in right in order with each other. They were batting, 5-6-7. 5-6-7. They combined to go 7 for 14 with 5 runs scored and 8 driven in.
Jeez.
That's the combo Saturday for those 3 guys. 7 for 14 with 5 runs scored and 8 driven in. That's the other thing. Like, even if their average isn't great, all 3 of them have electric bats. That's why they've all been moonlighting as top 5 prospects within the organization for a while. They've got raw skills. So, yeah, man, I mean,
4 doubles and a homer, too, between them.
Yeah, extra base hit power.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, and you mentioned the rest of the order, and Chapman goes 4 for 4. The only guys to not get hits were Yaz and Wilmer, and Lamont pinch hit for Wilmer, and he had a hit. And even Casale got himself another little hit in there.
Yeah, he drove in 2 runs.
Right.
And he walked twice.
It's starting to feel, and I know it's the Rockies, and I know it's a small sample, but for at least a weekend, Giants fans could look at the team and get excited about the young kids.
Well, this to me, it was a ton of fun, but now comes this sort of like normal sports fan worry, which is kind of like where this goes next. Look, if they all, or even one of them, if they flop, they flop and you can send them down. Matos is probably now the everyday center fielder the rest of the way, so I don't think he's going anywhere. The Giants are in a spot where they can just ride that out and be like, okay, we're giving him a runway. Let's see what he can do. But I want to know how much patience they've got, how much patience they have, because as they're looking at it, and remember, this always factors into it, is like, okay, who's making the decision and what's their perspective? Farhan Zaidi is looking at 3 guys, none of whom he drafted. Doesn't mean he doesn't like them,
right?
Or any of that stupid stuff. But these are not his prospects, and Farhan has to win. Like, they've got to win this year. I don't know if they've got to make the playoffs, but boy, they've got to at least win more games than they lose. They have got to do that to have any credibility with what they're doing. And so he's not going to do what so many fans have done in this conversation. I just play the kids.
Right.
Not like you're going to win anything. Well, they don't see it that way. They have got to win. They have to win. There is no, let's build this XYZ for next year. There is a ton of pressure on this organization to actually perform. And so that's why this 4-game win streak was so exciting. It has them right in a spot like nothing has been lost, but they have got to win. And we've watched it with all of these teams. When the pressure is on to win, who are you going to rely on? It's like asking Steve Kerr who you're going to play in the final 5 minutes. He's going to skew to the veteran almost every time. Almost every time. And so I wonder if the Giants will do the same thing. And that ramps up the pressure of each at bat right now for one of these 3 guys.
And it also ramps up the pressure on those vets if, in fact, Farhan does side with the vet over a young guy. And, when you get Conforto back and you decide, all right, eventually Elliot Ramos goes back down to AAA, if that's the move they choose to make, well, pressure's on Conforto to now produce like Ramos did when he was up here. And I think you're right about Matos. It feels like he's going to be the center fielder, although the Ryan McKenna addition is an interesting one, because if you do have a time where Matos is starting to struggle a little bit, McKenna's a guy who can play center field, or he's a guy who's got 4 hits this year. 2 of them are home runs, and the Giants claimed him not to just block another team. I'm sure they're looking at him as an outfielder that they may throw in the mix as they get further down the road.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, you just said it. Like, he plays center field. Luis Matos keeps running into walls. I mean, that's the other thing. You say, he's got the runway to be the center fielder the rest of the year. Well, what if he gets hurt? What if he needs a day off? Like, they need more outfielders. So I do not look at the McKenna thing as someone who's going to block one of these guys. If it is, that's horrible. That's a bad decision. You're not bringing in the Orioles DFA guy to get in the way of one of your top prospects. But if you needed another outfielder on the roster, then that makes total sense to me, and that's fine. Here's the other thing to bring up in this conversation about the Giants and sort of trying to make a run. Have you looked at the National League and their standings lately?
Yeah, everybody is 20 and 22.
There are very, very few. It's
Right.
almost like Steve Young's answer to us about the NFC for the 49ers.
There are no good teams.
There just aren't that many good teams.
Yeah.
Right? The Phillies are going to go to the playoffs. I'd be willing to bet just about everything that the Braves are going to go to the playoffs. The Los Angeles Dodgers are going to go to the playoffs.
It's hard for you to say that.
No, they're going to the playoffs. I love it when the Dodgers go to the playoffs. It's where they lose. It's tons of fun, actually. Just epic collapses in new ways every time.
Not every time, but
every time.
But 2020, they won the World Series.
No, they won a third of a World Series. We've been over this. They did not win the World Series. They won the COVID Series. Congratulations on your 1/3 of a ring. But someone will go out of the Central. The Brewers and Cubs both look solid enough. That's it. The Padres are a game over 500. The Giants are 2 games under 500. There's your National League. You know, it's all right there. So I still, no matter how frustrated we get, I thought last week was absolutely embarrassing. It's why I said what I said on Wednesday. I take none of it back. You're not allowed to look like that. And since then, they haven't looked like that, and they shouldn't look like that the rest of the year. That starting rotation, Dibs, look at me, should be in the playoffs. That starting rotation literally has no reason to not make the playoffs. I don't know how you can miss the playoffs in this league with that rotation.
Yeah, assuming you get Robbie Ray eventually. Even if Alex Cobb apparently not close to returning, according to Alex Pavlovich. So, you know, the rotation you dreamt about probably won't ever come to pass.
I mean, they got Cobb 6 guys.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Hicks has been unbelievable.
Hicks has been great,
and Logan's been great. Harrison's been solid.
They've won 7 straight games that Harrison has started.
Yeah. So if you can get Snell back to where Snell should be, and then you add Robbie Ray in July, I agree with you. You're not wrong about what your rotation. If your rotation is whole, Alex Cobb, who knows if he'll ever be able to pitch? Hopefully he will be. But if you do get all 6 guys back by midsummer, you should be humming. You should be a tough out for any of these teams.
I mean, even if that 5th day, you know, there's no Cobb, there's no Ray. If that 5th day has to be some sort of a combination of Ryan Walker as an opener, or we're pulling up the Mason Blacks of the world, or Keaton Wynn gets healthy at some point.
Reggie Crawford.
Hey.
You know?
Farhan already said it. Not as a starter, though.
Right, but he could be your opener.
As a reliever.
He could be your opener.
Could be your opener.
Like
That's probably a lot to throw on his shoulders right out of the
Sean
gate.
Jelly for 4. I mean, you've got options.
Absolutely. Mike in Oakland on Willard and Dibs. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Nothing much. How are you guys?
Great, man.
Mike?
I just wanted to ask you a question. I'm sorry if you guys might have already covered this. Can I get your guys' opinions on what the outfield should be when Conforto comes back?
Absolutely, Mike. We have been talking about that a little bit. If that were to happen, and you mentioned, Dibs, Conforto might be back as early as the middle of the week.
Yep.
Matos is your center fielder. Conforto and Yaz, sure, are going to be in the corners, I would say, against right-handers most of the time. But Ramos is your next outfielder. He's certainly in the lineup against left-handers. You can sort of mix and match if that's a day off for Yaz or a day off for Conforto. And I would give Ramos a little bit against right-handers, too.
Yeah.
It's 3 outfielders for 2 spots. That's going to annoy people. It's hard to get a flow of at-bats, but that's probably how you have to play it.
And especially when you talk about matchups and nobody wants to get a full platoon look in there, but Conforto is a guy who you absolutely, when healthy, have to have in.